Oh, hitting the button.
You might have to click on one to yourself on the mouse, and then after.
I was trying to get to the front page.
Yeah, see if you can scroll. Are you in control? Yeah, you got it.
But it doesn't go back to the front piece.
There is no, this is it.
Oh, I see. Okay, right. All right, let's do it.
But I'll let you switch out to the school logo if you want. Sorry. You got that up with the.
It's not like the live stream.
Oh, okay, sorry, Dave, want to false advertising.
I see. All right, ready? Yeah, hello, everyone, again. This is Daniel Giamario, president and founder of the TOTAMS Turning of the Ages Mystery School. And today, we're going to follow up on a lot of the other work we've done over these next couple of days. Over these last couple of days and going forward, this is our actually last full day of our event, which has really been fantastic. Incredible group, pretty good conditions, stellar, world-class musicians. It's really been great. What I'm hoping to do today in this next hour or so is to weave a couple of things together. One is about what I think is a remarkable pattern of 4 different eclipse paths of either annular total eclipses or total solar eclipses that crisscross the US. And I want to kind of weave that together a little bit with the US chart and to see where we go from there. I'm going to start off here just by some eclipse basics, although I'm not presenting this as a comprehensive eclipse presentation. But just for those that are less familiar with the subject, here we have some eclipse basics. And for those that maybe aren't seeing this, eclipses are part of a complex relationship between the sun, moon, and earth. They're extra potent new and full moons, which our school calls super new moon or super full moon. That's a little different than what the current astronomers use for those phrases. Eclipses occur when the sun, moon, and earth align and one casts a shadow, either on the earth solar eclipse on a new moon, or the earth shadow is cast onto the moon during a full moon. This kind of alignment is called a syzygy. Eclipses are part of a complex relationship between the sun, moon, and earth. They're extra potent new and full moons, which our school calls super new moon or super full moon. Eclipses occur when the sun, moon, and earth align and one casts a shadow. Yes, that's repeated. Sorry, folks. I don't know how that happened. Now it's not
Going forward here.
No, it's not working either way.
That reads that.
Okay. I don't know. Each year has 2 eclipse seasons separated by about 6 months. Each eclipse season has at least 2 eclipses, 1 solar eclipse and 1 lunar eclipse. Sometimes an eclipse year can have 3 eclipses in each season, totaling 6 eclipses. This is rare and only occur when a solar eclipse is surrounded by 2 minor penumbral lunar eclipses 2 weeks later, prior and 2 weeks later, or a total lunar eclipse is surrounded by 2 minor partial solar eclipses 2 weeks before and 2 weeks after. 3 eclipses in one season occurs about 8 times every 28 years. Solar eclipses occur with the new moon. Think of it as a super new moon, since it super amplifies the new moon energy. This part is also kind of an innovation of our school. Solar eclipses at the North Node are a seed point and a place of conscious intention, a portal into possible futures, if and only if the shadow of the personal and collective past is addressed. Solar eclipses at the South Node place a greater emphasis on the past shadow, a greater necessity to take the personal and collective past into account before the seed of intention for a future can be as powerful. Lunar eclipses occur with the full moon. We think of them as super full moons as the energy is amplified. Full moons are more about awareness and potential illumination and can be rather overwhelming. Shadows are brought to light. And you actually, the other thing about that is that, you know, like on a dark night, you don't really see shadows, but under a full moon, you do see shadows. Lunar North Node eclipses emphasize the future. The North Node is more about the future directional flow of personal and collective humanity. It can include our soul's intention to reach the destination point, but only after first addressing the past. Lunar South Node eclipses relate to our collective past and where personal and collective humanity have previously been. These may be areas where we need to have conscious awareness of before we go forward. I think that maybe it is a battery problem with this. Oh well.
You know what? No, try again because I had to click off for a second.
Oh,
There you go.
significance of eclipses. Your personal chart. If the degrees of the eclipse are within 10 degrees on either side of your sun, moon, natal chart angles, or personal planets, you are on the front lines of the eclipse. What we will not get into, and I may invite in the afternoon session, Gemini Brett has marvelous research and information about the Saroses. The Saros is a family of eclipses that occur every 18 years and 11 days, 223 synodic months, and 6,585.32 days. This repeating pattern of eclipse series occurs for 1,226 to 1,550 years, and is comprised of 69 to 87 eclipses, according to NASA. The Saros cycle, the nodal cycle of 18.6 years, and the metonic cycle of 19 years are the three most important cycles that involve the moon. These rather complex cycles also include the lunar standstill season. When working with the South Node eclipses, it's always best to spend adequate ceremonial time before the exact new moon, courageously calling out and bringing the shadow of the past into consciousness without any denial or spiritual bypass. Then at the time just past the exact point of the new moon, direct attention and focus intention on planting the seeds for the future. This will create fertile ground and a pregnant space for the great work of the greater reset, deep within the deepest descent of the Kali Yuga and part of this great turning of the ages.
Can I just ask, Daniel, do you mean by that the astronomical time of the new or the visibility time when I spot the new moon? Because that's a big difference to me personally. When you say ceremony, this is the time just past the exact point of the new moon.
Well, there's going to be a difference if you are in a place where you are seeing the eclipse. If you are not, then you can work with the timings of the eclipse. So when it begins to be partial, and then there's the time period where it's closest to exact, and then there's the time period after, and so that's the entire ceremonial time period. So you're referring specifically to eclipses, not just working with a new moon, right?
Right, so in this case, to clarify, you want to go with the conjunction itself, because that is the eclipse, right? And so we often say the new moon is the no moon because the moon can't be seen.
Right.
During the eclipse, it actually can.
Right, and actually, that's one of the really fascinating things about eclipses, is that you see the entire lunar cycle within the framework of the eclipse. So with a lunar eclipse, it starts full, it wanes, you get no moon, except the red, the orangish, reddish thing, and then it comes back to fullness. And actually, with a solar eclipse, you can somewhat work the same way, you know, where it's partial, and then you get to the exact point, which could be total, and then it comes back, you know, so the entire time frame is a ceremonial time frame. I know in my own experience with this, with lunar eclipses, which are quite long, I always recommend, we do this in our own family and we do it in groups, is that in the first portion of it is when we are sharing with each other personal and collective shadow. And then during the, I mean, because sometimes you may not relate specifically to the sign, and so then you can look at the collective version of it. And then during the time of totality, then that's a portal. And I always suggest that that's done in, you know, whatever version of receptivity you use, you know, meditation or silence, and then as it comes back, then you can announce what your seeds of intention are, you know, speak them out. And what we usually do by that time, then it can shift into open celebration. You know, so then we have our meal, or we start in a sense like partying, or, you know, having a good time at that point, you know. So that's just my own way. I mean, everybody's going to, you know, create a different way of working with it, but that's over the years. I've been an eclipse junkie for a very long time, and, you know, they've tried out different versions of it. I always suggest that lunar eclipses, although we're not specifically talking about lunar eclipses today, that those are really important, that if you're in a group, to stay in the sacred space of the group. I've had some extremely strange things happen in groups before, where people wander off during the totality, and things happen. They really do. In fact, it's understandable that why it is in ancient traditions, there was a lot of fear. In fact, a fairly well-known spiritual teacher, Pure Goliath, was openly said at one point that the only time in his life he ever feels scared is during a lunar eclipse, which was a interesting statement, you know. So I found that if you're doing it in a group, you really got to take it seriously, you know, and stay centered in the group.
Yeah, I was gonna add to that. I was at Joshua Tree once for a lunar eclipse, and a student of mine brought her daughter, teenage, and she kind of wandered off, and we had to go find her. And then in a recent one, easier story, but one of the group during the great solar eclipse here in 2017, he wanted to get away from the group and have some experience, which I can honor, but because he wasn't with us and hadn't been listening to the suggestions before, he didn't know he could take his flip glasses off during totality.
Oh, wow, right.
So he's kind of wondering why we're all screaming over here, and he only heard the movie. So be with the crew, stay on the ship.
Right. But particularly lunar winds, I found are like that. Yes, so that's just some eclipse basics, but we're going to be putting our attention here on 4 solar eclipses and how it relates to the US, and in combination with what most everybody here knows about the US chart and so I put the chart I use up on the board here. There's a lot of different charts people use, this is not the time during this live stream for a weighing the merits of all the different US charts. I'm putting up here the one I have been exclusively using, and this is the one that was rectified by Daniel Giamario, and this is based on the research he does in a book called The Astrology of America's Destiny that he wrote in the early 70s. And one thing, some things to point out. These are, and incidentally, for those who don't know, there's a whole package of things that have been collected together on our website of the different articles, long articles that I've written over the last couple of years, as well as some video presentations on the US chart, and I'm sure there'll be more to come. So what things that I've been looking at on this chart And this is the chart that has a 13-degree Sagittarius ascendant. It has a 27-degree Aquarius moon. One of the more important features of it is the Neptune square to Mars in Gemini. I have actually a whole article I've done on the Mars and Gemini position in the US chart. What happened here?
Oh, sorry.
I've also, spent time looking at what the, shall we say, the idealistic intent of this chart, which in our approach, it's the Gemini job in the Aquarius tribe from the past. And then look, it's the, oh, wrong one. It's the Sagittarius job in the Sagittarius tribe for the intent of that. If we look at that chart as of a person, of course, this is a chart of a country. I also consider this clumping of planets in Cancer in the 8th house, Venus actually just within that underworld, within 10 degrees. Jupiter on the other side of the sun, also Mercury in Cancer. And you'll notice Pluto down here in Capricorn, while it's not exactly opposite the sun, it is in opposition to Mercury. And I've often considered that one of the shadows of the US, I would say three. One is the Gemini thing I'll get to in a moment. Number two, the Cancerian shadow, which is we're number one for the clannishness or the capacity of compared to many other parts of the world, less interest in what's happening in the rest of the world. Like the myth of American exceptionalism. I mean, that to me is part of the shadow of the Cancerian aspect of it. But then when you throw in Mars in Gemini, there have been archetypal psychologists that have referred to the United States as a puer country. And the puer aeternus, the eternal youth, is one of the ways one can sometimes think of Gemini. And what I mean by being a puer culture, people like Stephen Jenkinson and Martine Frechtel refer to the fact that when the first Europeans showed up, they did not bring their elders with them. They were escaping, and it was mainly younger people who were coming over, and the elders were already here in the United States. And as a matter of fact, in the early years when they connected with the Native American tribes, they actually did have these long discourses with the elders. And actually some of the ideas that they got from them actually seeded the Age of Enlightenment and the ideals of democracy and stuff like that went into Europe, but from a very peculiar European stance, not the egalitarian and more matrilineal approach that was in North America. So the elders were here. They basically, the Europeans that came to the United States are orphans, trying to find their roots. And you put that together with the other aspect of Gemini. The so-called founding fathers warned against two-party system, but it's sort of like built into the chart. The U.S. couldn't get out of it. So you basically have that other feature of the U.S., which is team red, team blue, and it keeps inverting one back to the other, but it's just like just two choices, or even in my own generation, the Pluto and Leo generation, while you can actually idealize all of the things that were really quite revolutionary and counterculture about the Pluto and Leo generation, that was only about half. if that. In fact, the so-called leaders that we have today are mainly all like in the US, they're all like Pluto and Leo people, you know, so my generation, I can actually be embarrassed. That's the other 50%, you know, the ones that went super conservative, you know, so that bifurcation it just is built into the chart, basically. Well, for a good year and a half, Neptune, US was in a Neptune opposition to Mars in Gemini. And that was something happening in 91 and in 2021, 2022. Possibly even longer, because you know, if you apply the windows of initiation as we use in the school to a personal chart, it could then you come up with certain dates. But if we apply it to a country's chart, you could speculate that it's a wider orb. All right. Been thinking about those kind of things. We'll see that when we get to Chiron. And then, of course, the other shadow connected to the inversion of the ideal is of course, the Aquarius moon. And we already had another session about the shadow of Aquarius. Okay. And so there's marvelous original ideals, but then it would seem throughout most of American history, there has been it hasn't been followed, surely. That way. I mean, the words say one thing, the actions say something else. Now, at this point, I hope it's the next one. Yes. What is one of the reasons why I use and really care a lot about the US chart as rectified by Daniel Giamario? Well, check it out. This is Giamari's chart. And look at the ascendant. 13 Sagittarius. Look at the moon. 24 Aquarius. I mean, there's a lot of the other stuff is different, but it's also Mars and Gemini. Can you believe it? You know, so it's understandable. This guy who's was pointed out Edmund reminded me of it. That his birth name is Daniel, actually. But then born in France, but he spent most of his later years in the United States, and he really, in the late 60s, he really believed in the promise of America, and he loved the younger generation that was coming through at that point. That he was one of the elders that my generation honored. But I just think it's pretty stunning. And Neptune conjunct Mars, not Neptune square Mars, Mars in Gemini, Aquarius moon. It's pretty wild. So of course, I think that his insight into the US chart can be at least my way of gaining how do we say, verification. Certainly not scientific method, but works for me.
You might have one of the kind of rare Aquarius moons out of bounds.
I did not check that out. Yeah, that'd be worth some.
I'll take a peek.
Yeah. Let's see. Well, it would have been
Pretty close to the.
it's possible. 1895. There was one in I think in 2013. So I mean, under standstill season. So it could be. That's fascinating. And while it's slightly off topic, you've all heard of myself and others in the group talking about Rudolf Steiner. I just wanted to take this moment to show you Steiner's chart, which is a very interesting chart. So anyone who's ever been familiar with his writing or his talks or speeches, I mean, this guy is ultimate Saturn figure. I mean, boy, this guy spoke in a very serious way. And look at this chart. There's the Virgo moon, Saturn, almost precisely opposite Sun in Pisces. So here we have that Piscean, Mercury in Pisces, Sun in Pisces. And of course, if you've ever seen photos of him and imagine what it would have been like attending one of his lectures, Scorpio rising. And he was a well-known shadow magnet. You know, I mean, he polarized people, you know, and he had a lot of enemies. Anyway, I just thought there's the Mars and Taurus conjunct Pluto. And anyway, just thought you'd all be fascinated because that Virgo Scorpio combo is one of the ones which has always meant a lot to me personally.
What is the year, Daniel? I can't see it.
That's 1861, February 25th.
Okay.
11:45 p.m. in Croatia. What is now Croatia? At that point, I think it was part of the general larger Austrian Empire.
Yes.
But now it's located. That town is located in Croatia. Now, I just want to go through this fairly quickly so that we can actually then go into the eclipses. These are the initial charts of the previous major portions of the Pluto's transit to the US chart. And so, as you know, and I still think it's happening till later this year, if we use the criterion of a personal chart, the US is in its first Pluto return. Well, using the initiatory framework we use in the school, the square and the opposition, and then the return or the conjunction are the major portions of initiatory process. So the US is only, from its birth, only had two squares and an opposition until now. And so it's very interesting that the Pluto square in Aries, I mean, here's Pluto on 2733 Aries, and then the transit there, and so the US Pluto is 27 Capricorn. So there was Pluto square Pluto that was happening in 1848. Now, there were about 5 different squares. So it was a time period from 1848 to 1850. And the most of the speculation on that is that it's actually the run-up to obviously the Civil War. It's like there's this growing ferment, not only about slavery, but all other things that were happening with Mexico, the antipathy toward, I mean, both Canada and Mexico had already freed the slave, you know, and the US had not, and the tension was building up between states and federal government and all of that. But there's a lot of stuff else that was happening during those years. And I don't want to go totally into all of that because there's like the Neptune process, the Uranian process, the other Chiron returns, and so on that are happening in that time period. But I'm just representing, showing this that what do we have up here now? I shifted it without knowing it. Okay. So that was the first square between 1848 and 1850. And then we had the opposition, and this is, boy, another time period that's just loaded, including many things that we talked about in the first night, about, you know, the fourth turning, and about all kinds of things with Uranus that were happening at that time. And look at the time period of this. This was 1936. And so this was 1936 through 1938, when Pluto was opposing the US Pluto. And most everybody, maybe not the Europeans, but will know that, well, it even affected Europe. I mean, that's the time period of Great Depression, but it's the worst part of it. But it's also the time period leading up to World War II. And also a major bifurcation was happening at that time. Also, what was the bifurcation? Well, my own father went through this because he was living in New York City as an Italian boy in the 1930s. And during that time period, the Italians were very heavily, there's a lot of prejudice against them, but there's a lot of Italians that were there in New York, and they only had two choices, and they would be fighting in the streets. They either were supporting Stalin in Russia, or they were called brown shirts. You know, they basically were supporting Mussolini. So it was sort of like the communists versus the fascists, you know, was happening at that point. And actually, in the United States, a lot of people don't know this, that until the Pearl Harbor thing happened, the great majority of Americans would have sided with Germany, actually. And actually, Hitler thought that would happen, and he was shocked at what happened. Anyway, the World War II phenomena, then the way that the U.S. solved the Great Depression was through the welfare state. but that was a Pluto and Cancer generation, and the country did come together. There were victory gardens and everything like that. But the bifurcation shows up big time, and that was the Pluto opposition to the U.S. Pluto, which I think is real interesting. And then we have the square, Pluto square, that is the second of the waning square that was in 1982. And you can see here the moon, not the moon, here's Pluto at 27, 33. Libra. And worldwide and in the United States, I mean, that's 1982, 83. But what's the other thing about that time? Collectively, look at the Saturn-Neptune conjunction, almost precise at that Pluto square. Is really interesting. I don't want to unpack, try to go into all the things, you know, historically about all of this, but I thought it would be worth it to share with you what led up to the Pluto opposition. And on the first night, we discussed what the intent of a Pluto return or a major Pluto transit is, and I used the keyword composting. And then also it's a primary initiatory process to expose wherever there is hubris, overweening pride, trying to overstep the allocation, you know, humans trying to be God and so on, right? So those are, that's for, you know, future reference and other research anyone wants to follow up on. We have a couple of people in the school who just love doing the deep research into it. I tend to be one of these individuals that looks at the big picture, and then I hope we have people like, I don't know, he may be on live streaming now, call him out, Greg Nell, who just loves to go into totally every detail and very precise Virgo researcher. A blessing for his contributions.
Daniel, can I ask how often Pluto and Saturn conjunct like that? I know you've told me several times.
Pluto and Saturn?
Yeah.
It's three times in a century. So there was one in 1987. What am I saying? 1947. And then this one, and then there was one, I forget the date right now, early in the 20th century. So about three times in a century. Maybe I can't recall the number of years at the moment as far as the periodicity of it, but it's roughly three times in a century. And of course, we just had it again recently, you know, so you probably just figure it out, you know, go from 1947 to there to 2020, and you'll get a good sense of how often.
Pretty nearly accepted.
Pardon?
Pretty nearly accepted.
What's precise? Sorry?
3 times versus.
Yeah, right, I see, yes.
Depends on purpose.
Yeah.
Delay is just suggesting here, if you, the questions can't be heard, I'll try to remember to repeat them. That is almost about 3 century. It works pretty clearly exactly like that.
Well, it's just interesting, I guess, for me, like being born at the Pluto square and then having my Pluto square at the Pluto return.
Right, that's right, yeah,
With
yeah,
the
yeah,
rooted
yeah.
Leo moon.
These are definitely good things to note. So your generation is quite front lines. Let's go and put it that way. I remember I was living in those years. I was living in Hawaii. I just had moved to Hawaii, and I was just so over idealistic, you know, and I didn't know, not enough experience behind me. And I would give talks all around Hawaii about not just that configuration, but Neptune and Saturn and Uranus. That is happening later in the 80s. That rarity, I think only about every 700 years, so those two come together. And I was giving these talks like, the turning of the ages is imminent, you know. I was just like saying that all these incredible things will happen and it'll be world changing and so on. Well, I've soon learned that these outer planet relationships, it's not until maybe a generation later that you get a sense of what that was really about, you know. And then just for reference, since we're speaking of the US chart, and this is going to come into play as we dive into the eclipses. Here is the US 5th Chiron return, which is April 20th, 2024. But using the window of initiation, it actually begins a bit later this year. You know, so we're actually in the window of the Chiron return. When Chiron almost reaches 20, like this month, I think it's this month, that opens the window of the Chiron return, number 5. So here's keep this in mind as we go through the eclipses. Just a moment. To make reference to what we've done so far to that degree. 20 Aries 08. Something rather remarkable will be happening with that. All right, so any questions so far? This sort of prelude to the eclipses. All is well? What I noticed when I started looking at all of this, do we have the one that shows the tracks? Oh, we'll get to that in a few minutes. I know that there have been 4 eclipses that have tracked through continental US. 1 in 2012, 1 in 2017. 1 this year, and 1 next year. And it just, I don't know if I've ever noticed a phenomenon quite like this. And that includes the eclipse that captured the imagination of the world, but primarily US, the one in 2017, which I had the good fortune of having a small group of shamanic astrologers. We were up in along the near well, it's the gorge that is just north of Bend, Oregon. And so we went along the edge of the gorge to where we're kind of parallel with Madras, Oregon, and we had spectacular conditions. And it's the second time I've seen a complete, total experience of a total eclipse. I've been clouded out a number of times, but that one, it was a great success with our group. And I think, how many here were able to experience that one? So this is just, pardon me, so you have the information. This is the one in 2012. I'm wondering, maybe currently, why don't, Owen, if you can help me here now. This one is on May 20th, 2012. And it's a Gemini moon, sun, moon, 0 Gemini. South node at 5 Gemini, Venus at 23 Gemini, and that's US Mars, okay? And Pluto had already moved into Capricorn. And based on Arizona, but you can't really do much with the angles because it'll be different about every 2 hours. Can you go to Stellarium? We'll show the path of this one. Not Stellarium, sorry, time and date.
Yeah.
Was that one annular?
That was an annular one.
Okay.
By the way, for those who may not understand, get what we mean by that, what is called an annular solar eclipse. Annular, this can be confusing for people. Annular doesn't mean year. Annular. It's close. It's close, right? So I used to be confused by that, right? But it's actually every bit as total as a total eclipse. But what happens is that the moon, just due to whether the moon can be closer or farther from the Earth, so the moon isn't quite far enough out to entirely cover the sun. So you have this really, I love those things. I like them almost as much as total solar eclipses. So you have the moon covering the sun exactly, but there's a ring around the moon. And so so annular means, I get the way they use that word is the ring eclipse. So the pathway here, you can see that it went across the Pacific Ocean, and then it entered the U.S. in the west. And in fact, if you can zoom in on the Oregon coast there. Further back along the coast, Oregon coast. Back to the coastline.
Yes.
Yes.
I think it's what's nice.
And then zero in right on the coastline, and you can see where the track had made.
Okay.
So actually, that's actually northern. That's Eureka, California.
But then up into Oregon, you can see the border there. So Medford, Oregon is right.
So all those places there, I mean, zone in a little bit more. You can see some of the towns that pop up. Should be popping up. Get to go to the coast, some of the coastal cities.
Looks like that's as far as close.
When I looked at it, some of the other ones showed up.
Look, there's Willow Creek, everybody.
Oh, yeah, further. There's Eureka. But I know there's some of the coastal towns along Oregon when I was looking at this before. But so,
Yeah.
Brookings would be one.
yes.
Like is awesome.
So the wire date.
Yeah,
Timeandsdate.com.
it's a really good
And
one.
then their sun moon calendar. Another really wonderful one is moonlink.info.
Mm-hmm.
Medford, Grants Pass is in there, so it would be all the coastal Oregon towns that are parallel with there.
You know what's kind of interesting though, is because what's in the red, like, well, when you zoomed in, Willow Creek was in the red where I live. But it wasn't as visible as Oregon, but it looks like it is on that path.
That's the annular path, but the thing is that when you get to the edge of the pathway there, it could only be 20 seconds.
Oh, okay,
When you get to the middle of it, then it's longer.
okay,
Yeah.
yeah.
And now, Alan, if you can take it over toward New Mexico. We just slowly move it across the US and you can see where it hits. So there's New Mexico. And you will notice something interesting if you make it a little bit there. Look there. Roswell. Roswell's going to come into our story a bit later. So and then it ends. It's ending right past Roswell in that area of Texas. And it also zero in on Arizona for a moment. And I'll show you where I saw this. I had a group of 5 or 6 people. Right in the extreme northern part, I believe there is an area of northern Arizona called the Vermilion Hills. And I was camped at the Vermilion Hills where we had a marvelous experience of it. In fact, it's the first time I ever saw it. Is that what happened on that day during annularity? The ring was formed. All of a sudden, the ring became like a kaleidoscope, different colors. That was just like flashing, different red, blue, whatever, as the ring around the sun.
You can look at that part.
Huh?
Can you look at that?
Yeah.
Make it up.
Yeah.
Make it up.
You can.
It's definitely brighter than the total. What was the date of the Venus transit that happened just after?
That was that year also. We were over in Hawaii at Green Lake. That was in June, I believe.
Yeah, June 5th, and it's so occultation by the moon and then by Venus.
Yes.
So a little bit of Venus. We were at that observatory that day. This is
We were with us.
The observatory in Hawaii.
We saw the transit at Green Lake. We were at Green Lake when we saw Venus go across. That was the Venus transit,
Yeah, Venus transit.
but that was at Green Lake where we went. We also went to the observatory
What's the observatory? And I remember they were showing us.
at first,
Yeah.
and then we drove out to Green Lake for the event. Yeah. Okay, so let's go to the so just keep that pathway in mind and respond. So next we'll go to oh no.
You want to go back to the chart?
Go to the 2017 chart. Sorry. So now we go up to the 2017 eclipse that we were just speaking of, and some of us were there to see it in different places. And so this is the sun and moon 28 Leo. And some of the other features you can see there. South node at 24 Aquarius. That's that nodal axis that we were this nodal axis then relates to that US moon. Okay. And there's other things you can unpack here, but it's not, there's things about 2012 and 2017 in the US chart that are not quite as strong as what you're going to see coming up. But what's interesting now about this one, actually the Jupiter position is angular also with the US chart. Venus at 24 Cancer, which is prominent, that area is prominent in the US chart. But let's go and look at this track. This eclipse was a pretty nice long one in order to really get into it, but the one coming up in next year is even longer. All right, so this is the 2017 one, so go to the coast first. Look where that one comes in. That's definitely Oregon coast big time there, see? Over, no, that now we're off the coast now. No, there's Newport there, sorry. And Lincoln City, Newport, over Portland. Where were you for that one, John?
I was in Idaho up near Sun Valley.
Hmm.
Yeah, we did a retreat at friends, hot springs called Trinity Hot Springs, and then had to drive about an hour from there to get into the path. So I had less totality than you did, Daniel. I had like a minute and a half, I think.
Mhm. So let's just, yes, take it back so we can see the whole path. There's the Idaho location he's mentioning. Go through Wyoming, Nebraska.
I was in Fall Creek Falls, Tennessee. Like 7 minutes.
In there, so that this one does not go down to the, the Texas, New Mexico area, but I do find it interesting. There's two different ones that come in approximately the same area of the west coast of the US.
Well, see, I was in Vermont and I do recall experiencing,
Partial,
yeah, so even here in New Mexico, there was
partial.
even more of an experience than we had way over here. So you could say that's good.
The reason I'm putting these two up here is because I think they, as you'll see, related to the 2023 and 2024 ones. So let's look at the chart for the one that's upcoming. Here's where if things align nicely, maybe we can all, some of us can gather favorite hot springs for this one. So here we have it at the sun, moon conjunct at 21 Libra. And you can see some of the other features there. There's still within the close range of the Pluto return. And as you all know, that Pluto is just barely tipping its toes into Aquarius, and then going back for a fair amount of time in the Capricorn, and that will be the case then. It's really almost back. There's the date that somebody has an ephemeris can look up the date. I forgot to notate it for this presentation. The date that Pluto goes stationary direct, which would have been just a little bit before this, is the time period where I'm looking at is the end of the Pluto return, if we use the same criterion for a person.
And
So
so
that's where-
what date is this? I can't read it.
October 14th,
It's my birthday, and I get the date. It's my birthday.
indeed.
Yeah, you want Pluto's recent station director, the
Coming
back in Capricorn.
Right,
Yeah, let me give you.
I
that
think it's in
date.
October, I'm
The
pretty sure.
retrograde-
Nice solar return again.
I'm pretty sure it's in October, but
The retrograde is May 1st,
Yes.
and then station direct is October 10th.
10th, October, my birthday. So Gail, the
Yes.
stationary direct is October 10th, and then the eclipse is your.
Any kind of word, if you say honestly.
It's love. You are made of love, and it can only increase.
And here we have Chiron at 17 Aries. Already, so I'm speculating into the Chiron return. And some other features that might be of interest. The nodal axis not specifically related to the US chart.
On Spica though.
Put the US chart here so we can see like the overlay.
You have it up there at the same time?
Yeah.
Yeah.
That
That
would
would
be
be,
easier to read this.
Oh.
See it.
You know, you could pause the share here and then go to do things and put it in the, oh, whatnot. It'll take about 3.5 minutes.
All right.
We have a master DJ on hand.
several.
Yeah, no, I'd love for you to feel what you see in like the amount of planets in the sacred hoop in the US chart.
Yeah,
Something I think they actually elected. And Jupiter returns for the Constitution in 87. And the next return is Washington's weird death. And that's all in that painting in the Capitol building as well.
well, what it brings to mind to me is that I think that in following Rijar's work on it, that whether or not that is exactly when it happened, it's like that's the date they wanted for it. You know what I mean? So it's set up. It was like they wanted that exact timing to have those alignments. I actually hadn't considered your question, and so we have considering it's an Aquarius moon, and you want to have look at that, all of those from 8 Gemini through 24 Cancers right at the edge of the hoop. Yeah, that whole thing is within the sacred hoop. Fascinating. And then Sag job and the Sag tribe, you know, so they're wanting to have an idealistic project, you know, which would be Cancerian and plumping the planets in Cancer right near the galactic edge. Pretty interesting.
Yeah.
Thank you for that.
There's a lot of really strong Bohemian star alignments to those degrees. Mercury's on Procyon, the Sun's with the Sirius degree. Uranus, which they would not have known about yet, was at Ultron. Mars is at Capella.
Right, yeah. Yeah, it's to me, it's a setup, the chart. I mean, it's without question, it's the esoteric design of the Master Masons. I was going to ask you over a meal is that when you at the very end of your presentation, when you were saying, is that the actual White House? You know, the Masonic temple, right? You know, probably. Okay, so let's go to the time and date for the 2023 one. Get the overview on it first. I mean, like the whole country. All right. Well, look where that one's coming in. There we go. Look at that. Just south of Portland. Coming in on that same sort of US coastline. I think that's pretty weird, actually. And now extended. They take it through, you know, that's a good shot there, where we go through Nevada and through New Mexico. And then that kind of make it, yeah, there you go, all the way down through Texas. Look, you can't help it. I can't help but notice this thing, all right? Right there, look, Roswell. So that's two annular eclipses in a row that are right going over. Do you all know? Is there anybody who doesn't know why I'm sort of making a big deal about Roswell? You all know. Okay. It's also close to the Trinity site area, you know, where the first atomic bomb is created, you know. And truth or consequences, you know, that area there, they changed the name to that right around that time period. Truth or consequences, the New Mexico town. So this, I think, is amazing. I mean, that this is also, as you'll see later, crossing the second one we've looked at. All right. So here and just to mention, this event that we hope can happen in Faywood Hot Springs is only about a 3-hour drive. The center line of the annular eclipse is about a 3-hour drive from Faywood Hot Springs. So I think it would be really cool to have maybe a synodic cycle cosmology workshop there. And then it's around noon that it happens in October. And then you can just get in a couple cars and drive on pretty clear, fast roads to the line. Take about 3 hours, and then you can get back to Faywood Hot Springs, you know, after the experience. So let's look at the one that most people are putting their attention on, and that is the 2024 one. So this is, did I do something that I really do wrong? So this is not this one. This there we go. April 8th, 2024. And this one has been referred to as for those who follow the US chart, you know, this is the eclipse that clearly is referring to the US Chiron return. Why? Well, look at where Chiron is. 1924 Aries. And there's this incredible thing there. Actually, this is why is the moon there different? Well, that's 1 minute. All right. Sometimes the program does that.
Might get parallaxes on. So that's the deal, by the way, with the eclipse. When seen from the surface of the Earth, not happening at the time on our charts where we measure from the center of it, right? So there's a setting in most of the softwares where you can elect to have the parallax moon or topocentric coordinates that will show you the actual timings of the surface place. Usually it's exactly in the next.
Well, look at
Go to settings in here. I already got
you might not be able to see it that clearly, but there's just something phenomenal. Not only is it, of course, with the new moon, sun moon. Look at Chiron. It's the same within 1 minute. 1924 Chiron, and the eclipse is 1923 in Aries. And the fact that is, you know, less than a degree of what the US Chiron is. I mean, are we being told something? I mean, it seems like a pretty clear message here. As my friend Greg in his writings puts it, and I agree with him, the previous Chiron returns, the teacher aspect of Chiron, which is to be aware of your fracture points, to see where your quote sacred wounds are, and then to be able to digest it and to be able to incorporate it as your healing medicine. It appears that every time the US has been in a Chiron return, they haven't done that. You know, so, and I'm not going to go through all the different Chiron returns right now. We don't have time in this session to do that. Maybe we can bring some of that up in the afternoon if it seems to fit into what we're doing. The issue here, though, would be the 5th Chiron return with this eclipse just after the Pluto return at the 4th turning at the bottom of Kali Yuga. what is the intent of having this solar eclipse happening at that time? Well, I mean, the advice we always generally give is that in a solar eclipse, it can be a major breakthrough if you want. It's possible, but you'll notice that this is in fact possible because it's a north node eclipse. But only if you are serious about looking at what the shadow material has been. And I don't necessarily want to be, particularly to those that are not US people here, I'm not trying to make this US centric, you know, but Jung said, you know, if the collective West does not deal with their shadow, then, and he warned about that back in the 50s, you know, that there would be, well, it would be not his language, a Plutonian kind of thing would happen. You know, there would be the composting, you know, it's just not going to be able to go any further. And I just haven't seen my own home country. Remember, I'm an expat, you know, I just decided to not be in the US, but there's some work to be done, you know, and we have to be anticipate that if the Chironic teaching doesn't come through, well, then it's just what happens when you're in a Chiron return yourself personally, is that if you don't honestly deal with where those challenges, difficulties, fracture points, many of the ones that are just the usual suspects, you could have a very unique one, of course, but the usual suspects would be like betrayal, violation, separation, lack of self-love, all those kind of things that every human being has one or more of them. But then it can be a very unique one also. And if those things aren't digested, you know, so you're no longer a victim. I always idealize the Chiron return, if you take it seriously, is the time period where all stories even out. And like you made it, whether you were a survivor or whether you had absolute perfect upbringing, whatever that is, the stories even out. And then you can go forward, you know, without that being the story. So the US has had 4 other time periods to do that. And here's yet another one. So what happened here?
Just pulling up the live stream chat if you wanted to see which
No, I'm not.
people chiming in.
Oh, I see.
Your wife included.
Yeah, it's over.
Oh, I see, but you are almost in the US colony. No, she's referring to the fact that in the Philippines is a US colony. She's referring to that. And ever since the new prime minister has come in, son of Marcos, known as Bong Marcos, even more so, he was groomed to be the WEF darling when he went to Oxford, you know. I mean, so anyway, that's another subject. So let's go down to the map of the 2024 one.
All right, hold on.
I just want you to keep in mind this amazing thing. The first 3 we've looked at all come in on the California coast, or the West Coast, Oregon, Northern California. Okay, so this one does not come in that way. So this is
Crossing.
Yeah, absolutely. So it's crossing a wide swath of the US. Actually, I've been talking. Yes, indeed, yes. So you probably will be following a lot of Mexican information about that. And in fact, I haven't spent time looking at what quote sacred sites it goes over in Mexico. I'm not sure. Maybe someone here knows more about that. I've been discussing with Vivian about having an event really close to the concentration of the mountains, which the path will go over, including as far as we look at the Ohio area.
It's not directly in the totality, so we'd have to drive about an hour.
But it does go, it doesn't quite go over Cincinnati, right?
It's north of side by Dayton, Ohio.
There's the path, so it goes over Indianapolis, Cleveland. And there, Cincinnati is right on the edge.
Yeah.
I'm just reminded of what you said, that Cincinnati is built on an old mountain.
Yeah,
Maybe some of these other places also. But go back down to the Texas area now. So many cities it goes over. This is over 4 minutes long, this one. And maybe just sort of keep it in that zone, a little bit further down. San Antonio, that zone there. So it turns out that one of the other ones crosses this. So there's actually a small area of Texas where one path crosses this path.
I think it's.
That's got significant. That would have some juice and significance.
I would think so, right? In fact, we have a map. We have on that map of where they crisscross. Can you put that up? Or do I-
There's one at greatamericaneclipse.com.
That's what I'm
Down
Uh,
Austin Pyramid.
does it go to Boston?
Yeah.
Where? Oh, I see it right there.
But I don't know if the crisscross hit Austin. But
It did, it was a little higher.
Hmm?
It was a little higher. I'll get some sacred sites in Mexico for you. I'm just tuning into that now. Pretty close to Monterrey, so.
yeah, I know.
Okay, back to the one at the top there, the one at the top.
There's a website on sacredsites.com.
Here's one of them. This shows where the annular solar eclipse, October 14th, crosses.
Oops, sorry.
But I have one of my articles has that map. Get used to this one of these days. So there's two of them that cross there, the 23 and the 24.
Any study or history of eclipses crossing like that, and there being some event happening, like that something's been activated there in the crosshair? Is there any history or study on that?
Not that I'm aware of, but what about having four tracks in such a few years crossing one area? The one that you had there first, here.
Great American.
No, not that one. The one for I guess the one for my article, because there's another place. Here, go up, there, that one. Here, because here's the one of the crisscrosses, the one in Texas, okay? We also saw how two paths went over New Mexico, Roswell. And that one, this doesn't show all four, unfortunately. But then a big deal is made about this, which is when where the 2017, I think this is the
2017.
yeah, crosses the 2024 one right here, which is near the New Madras Fault. So now, as far as not having research on this that I'm aware of, I would like to speculate with you on something, which is that it has to do with the issue of, like, if you have an eclipse, what is the time period for which it would work for? And there's a difference of opinion about that among astrologers. And I think, based on certain experiences that have happened with eclipses in my life before, that they not only have to do with a current time period, okay, like, or obviously the connection with individual charts, you know, so if you have the degrees of the eclipse close to something important on your chart, that's something to pay attention to for sure. It's like a super amplified point on your own chart for reasons you can understand. But I think they also kind of show what's coming up next. You know, so therefore, the 2012 one and 2017 one are presaging 2023 and 2024. I had that experience one time where I was going to go see a total eclipse in Indonesia on the island of Sulawesi. I ended up going to that eclipse, but a year later, that very location was twice inundated by a tsunami. So I actually think they presage events also. It's just what I'm sensing about this. The 2012, 2017 ones are presaging 2023 and 2024. What are they presaging? Well, I don't know of any, I've never seen, again, I mean, I am a researcher, but not as much as some people. But I don't know who anyone else has referred to this, that there's these four paths hitting the same area, continental US, and sometimes Mexico, but not always, in a time period of only 11 years. I mean, there are places on the planet that can go 100 years without ever having a solar eclipse path going over them. And here are 2 annular eclipses and 2 solar eclipses in the space of 11 years, crisscrossing the US, as well as 2 tracks covering the same area. Twice. I mean, one is the one I showed you that goes over New Mexico, you know, we're kind of like Roswell's right in the center. And then the crisscross that happens in Texas between the 2 total solar eclipses. You know, when you use the annular eclipses, then you get some other crisscrosses. I don't know. I just thought it was something very much to be aware of.
Looks like a lot of earthquakes to me, and that's already what we've been getting.
Well, and that includes also that zone off the Pacific coast.
Right. That's
Where there's
been so much activity.
and then the crisscross at the New Madras fault line.
Right.
It's also the Mason-Dixon line, maybe there's gonna be some more the Confederate flag.
That's great, yes. I want to create one that shows actually all 4.
But you're saying it's a lag time, almost like a year later things. It's not like during it, it's almost like
Right.
there's this lag time of it take a
Yes.
kind of solidifying.
That's what I've noticed,
Which is
particularly
interesting.
with the total one in Indonesia, it happened like that. Before we complete this speculation here today, let's take a few chats and then we can maybe wrap this up. Let's see. Hey, there's Bruce Gordon. All right. Of course, Lynn. Glad you're watching. Susanna, greetings from Maine. Someone is named Neo. All right. Maybe that's and fascinating in terms of heraldry, these eclipse patterns on the yeah, that's sort of similar to what you were bringing up, you know, it becomes a heraldic pattern, you know. Dividing the US into 6 parts, the next 2 is areas in last thing before I forget, and we'll take a couple of minutes break and then we turn it over to Gail, which is the one that's coming up in a few days, which has tremendous bearing on the Chiron situation. Just, can you briefly bring up I forgot to tell you this ahead of time. The eclipse that is happening in a few days. Not visible here, but the degrees of it are pretty interesting. Because I think it does signal as an astronomical event, the beginning of the US Chiron return, and I think you'll see why. You will certainly see why. Here's Chiron, Sun and Moon in Aries, 29 Aries, Jupiter at 23 Aries. Jupiter having already conjuncted Chiron, and Chiron just 3 degrees from, 4 degrees from the US Chiron. So I think this is could be thought of as the celestial event that begins the US Chiron return. So this happens just a few days after we're done here. And here, Mars, 13 Cancer, and all of these, this part of the chart in the hoop. So we're getting a lot of messages, and as a school, we plan to ceremonialize these things, and as much as possible, have gatherings, during these timings. And I'm sure you're the same, gentlemen.
I'm wondering, time probably doesn't allow, but I'm wondering if I can add 6 slides to this.
Yes, I would love you to. We can maybe do a little more on this in the afternoon.
Yeah, great. I've got these eclipses of the US chart. I think
Cool.
that works.
Cool. I'm sure. I thought this would inspire some collaboration. So it's
You're
beautiful.
always inspired.
Yeah, you do too. Okay. So thanks everybody for being here for this, and we'll take a bit of a break and then we'll continue with our next live stream. Thanks for being with us.
How many minutes do we have?
Not more